Alright guys, so a couple days later, we're gonna put this thing even more together. So I just covered this while I was, waiting pretty much for all this to settle. So I did check yesterday, the head bolt torques, they were still at 90, so didn't even have to tighten them. I still went through and made sure they're all at 90, but seems to be holding the torque pretty well. So I guess now what it's time to do is put this crank pulley on. So technically that step came before putting the head on in the FSM, but kind of was avoiding it because I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to torque this. But I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to flip this upside down, and I'm going to put a block of wood in the crankshaft, similar to how I took it off. That way I can torque this down to 304 foot-pounds, which is pretty insane, and kind of just hope this whole thing doesn't rotate. So we need the crank pulley on there in order to properly set timing. So either way, it's got to go on. So I already have it cleaned up, the crank pulley cleaned up over here. And I'm just going to use the same bolt because it doesn't mention anywhere about replacing the crank pulley bolt. So I'm just going to keep it. I don't really see a need to replace it, to be honest. I mean, it's a hardened steel. I think it should be fine. And if it breaks on me, well, that's going to suck. But hopefully not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take more of our assembly lube over here. I'm going to take our crank, and I'm just going to lubricate where this seal rides pretty much, and I'll lubricate the inside in here. I don't think that's necessary, but definitely where the seal sits I do think is necessary. So we're going to lubricate that, and then we're going to get this crank pulley on and this engine flipped over so I can basically torque this thing without rotating the engine. So I don't have the flex plate on yet, which is why I can't just brace the flex plate because it's kind of sitting over in a corner somewhere. I can't really do that yet. So that's why I'm going to have to stop the crank from moving from the oil pan, which I'm still waiting on the template for the oil return line or oil return drain for the future turbo that's going to go on here. Just going to throw this crank pulley on. Nothing too crazy to note here. Just got to make sure that it lines up with the key at the bottom and our crank pulley bolt. So I did notice, so something else to consider is that these valve buckets or tappets or lifters or whatever you want to call these little buckets here, if I were to turn this engine upside down right now, all of those cam buckets would fall out, which means I would have to redo valve lash and match everything up again. So two things we can do. We can put the cams back in with just like two cam caps just so they don't fall out, and we can flip the engine and then torque it, which I think that's the route I'm going to go. Or we can try to brace the crank from the bottom, which I really don't want to mess with. So only thing I'm going to do really quick is throw this camshaft in here. Not literally throw, obviously gently place in here. That in there, and then I'll just get the front and back cam caps, just so the cam doesn't fall out when I flip the engine upside down. And I'm not getting them tight, like super tight. I'm just literally threading them in finger tight so the cam doesn't physically fall out. They're just going to be snug on here, basically. Cam still has a little bit of room to move, which is fine. Okay, the cam's not going to move around too much. Now we can put this exhaust cam in here, very gentle-like. And again, just going to use front and back cam caps to hold it in place. So it's not like these cams are like aligned or anything. They're just kind of sitting in here, just so these cam buckets don't move and fall out and cause me emotional harm. Now I'm just going to turn this upside down. I think we should be okay to do that. Okay, perfect, exactly what I wanted. So basically this just exposes the crankshaft balancing lobes. That way we can put something to stop the crankshaft from rotating. So last time I did it, I used a basically a punch, but I think I'm gonna try to use this block of wood to stop this sucker from rotating, if I can. Pretty confident that should do it. Well, so we need to turn this to the right, so it's gonna rotate to the right, which means we need to put it somewhere like here, perhaps. Shouldn't be a big deal to rotate this because the cam's not attached to anything, but I will need my 30 mil socket. I'm hoping this piece of wood will basically hold up and not break. I heard some crackling already of that piece of wood, so I don't know if it's gonna work. But what I can do, we can back this off and I'll put 2 pieces of wood there. Since I have them, I should put my hammer there. Recently found my hammer, so the wood handle of my hammer I'll also put there. And hopefully that'll be enough to stop this thing from rotating, yeah. If not, we're just gonna snap a few pieces of wood. No big deal. Actually, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna recruit my girlfriend to stand on this engine stand on that opposite side so I don't flip this engine. And we have to put this pin back in over here, because 300 foot-pounds is a lot. I'll be right back. Let's get the girlfriend over here to weigh this thing down a little bit. So I have my assistant here who's going to hopefully stop this engine stand from flipping over. And I've got my torque wrench. It's 250. 267. 305. All right.
That's it?
That's it. Just like that. So my torque wrench actually doesn't go to 250, but if you overextend it, it'll go into the 300 range. So essentially I just set it to the max of 250 and then just kept going until it said 305. So now we can remove these blocks of wood. And the reason I use wood instead of like a metal punch, just to avoid damaging the crankshaft. So you can see, totally fine. You know, no, there's some wood marks on the on the crankshaft, but we didn't break any wood, we didn't dent anything. Good to go. Quite a bit of pressure on here. You can see it kind of dug in to the side of my hammer, but so that's fine. I never use this hammer. All right, so now we can flip it right side up again. If you had any doubt about how heavy this engine is, let this be an example of how insanely heavy this thing is. Ugh. Just didn't want to move. All right. There we go. Pretty good engine stand for handling this kind of abuse though. So now, basically all we're going to do is we're going to set this crank pulley timing right here, down here. So you can see, here's the mark on the crank. We need to be lined up with that 0 mark right there. I'm just going to hold the timing chain just so it all rotates as one. And that is pretty much zeroed up. Can't complain. All right, so now that's ready. Now we can do the rest of the timing, which I'm gonna follow the FSM for, obviously. But that was our first step, was to get that crank at top dead center. Next one is, so we're gonna remove this exhaust camshaft. Almost lost it. And then I'm actually going to remove the intake camshaft too, because I want to throw some more assembly lube on some of this stuff. Just so that first startup goes without any damage. No dry running. Dry runs are good, but not for engines. Okay, so same process as I was doing with the timing chain guide. So the only thing I'm really going to focus on are these cam journals, which already have some kind of oil on them, it seems like. So the machine shop did put some on. And then the tops of these little cam buckets. And we're just going to throw a bunch in here. We're going to be pretty generous. So I think when this camshaft goes in, we need to look at cylinders 2 and 5 and make sure those are enacted on, basically. So that's essentially going to be pointed down, and then it's probably going to be something like this, if I had to imagine. I think they say the single dot mark should be roughly 25 degrees in this orientation. And then we're going to put on number 2, is it 2 and 5? I don't know, I gotta check the FSM. Just checked with the FSM. So you want cylinder 1 cam lobes and cylinder 4 cam lobes facing downward. So this is cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're gonna put on cam caps number 2 and number 5. So I'm gonna get a little bit more of assembly lube. I'm gonna get those cam caps, number 2 is right here. It's even marked number 2, which is cool. More assembly lube. Can never have too much assembly lube, guys. Okay, so that's number 2. Just gonna get that like finger tight, basically. I'm gonna get an actual ratchet. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and number 5. 1, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and that's cylinder 1, 2, 3, and 4. We can count. At least we know that. All right, same deal for here. These are all numbered, and it tells you whether they're intake or exhaust because they're marked with an I, and they even tell you which direction they go, which is forward. So it's very difficult to mix it up, unlike some other brands, let me tell you. Okay, so those are the 2 that we're going to focus on first. And essentially we're just going to tighten them evenly, kind of the same way we did when we took them off, just opposite. Obviously, I mean, that's what this whole build is. You know, that's what building things is. Putting it back together the opposite way you took it apart. So now we're going to tighten these uniformly until they are snug with the cylinder head. So essentially, we're just gonna run these in just a little bit by our fingers. Basically take up all that excess movement on both sides. It's about where it stopped there. Pretty much, we're just gonna go quarter turn by quarter turn. So now we've got our two most important cam caps in place, and now we can basically put all the other ones on. I believe the first one is last, so we're gonna wait to put this one on until last. I'm just gonna add some more assembly lube here real quick. It should be good to go. Now we'll grab the rest and just put them in here. All but the first one. For whatever reason, they want you to leave the first one alone. So we're gonna leave it alone until the end. And these are not nearly as arduous as the other ones. You just want to make sure that they're even as far as left to right. I don't think you really have to worry about going, you know, front to back too much, because these all just sit in here. So that's not really a concern. You just, like I said, just make sure that they're even right to left. So I'm just going to drive them in pretty much by hand until they stop moving. Now, of course, we have one that goes in the number 1 slot. Don't know why they had that one for last. All right, so that's all of these hand tight. So now we're gonna go around and we're gonna torque these to, I believe, 12 foot-pounds. Let me double check. 12. So I'm gonna start with cylinder 1 over here, and we'll jump over to cylinder 4. Okay, and then we just do the rest. Okay, so now I'm kind of faced with a little bit of dilemma. So I want to replace this camshaft sub gear. So I've got a new one right here, and essentially I would just have to replace this, remove that bolt, undo that snap ring, and take this sub gear off and just place this new one on. But I don't have like a vise or anything to put this in, and I'm not sure how difficult it is to realign these two marks. So there's a spring washer in between that snap ring, and I believe that's pretty much it. It does have some wear on it, so I would rather replace it. I think we might do it. Might be a little risky. I might need to find a friend with a vise, but I'm thinking that's probably the correct thing to do, even though I don't want to do it. Like I said, this exhaust camshaft is made up of 2 gears, right? So previously in the video when I was taking this apart, I thought this was for variable valve timing. I was incorrect. It's actually for backlash backlash, I believe, or just lash in general. So your gear lashing, right? So when 2 gears mesh together, you know, they need some type of clearances, and that's what this provides. Shout out to Ricky from RM Garage for correcting me on that, because I didn't really think about that when I said it, and it was totally incorrect, and I hate giving out bad information. So just want to clarify that. So what we're trying to do is replace that subgear. Now it says use a vise. I don't have a vise. I do have a press, but the press kind of makes me nervous because I don't want to break anything, right? So it looks like I can basically undo the service bolt. Looks like there's just a snap ring. I don't think it looks too bad, guys. I think we can get away with just doing this as is. And tell you what, I'll do it. And if it is difficult, you guys will see that you shouldn't do it without a vise of some kind, probably. So I'm just removing this bolt that basically just clamps these two things together. These two gears together, right? So that means this is going to rotate, just like that. And then eventually we're going to have to figure out a way to get that back together. But now we got to remove this snap ring, which should be pretty simple, I hope. Pretty simple with the right tools, right? And then here's a spring washer that comes out, and then this sub gear should just finagle its way out of here, I believe. Let's see, how many times can I use the word finagle? Okay, there is a gap. Yeah, so this just comes right out. It's already moving, which that's a good sign, right? So I don't know if I want to use any like hard tools in here to get this off. It looks like I'm going to have to. All for you guys. That's the only reason I'm doing this. Otherwise, I probably would have left it. Still don't know how I'm going to get that service bolt back in the position, but that sounds like a problem for future Kody. We're sneaking it out here. Not too bad. I'm not using like a ton of force. I'm being gentle on purpose because I'm afraid to break something. It's definitely being overly gentle. All right. So that is the old one. Here is the new one. And I really hope this was worth it. Oh, I see. Okay. So there's just like this ring in here. Let me explain this. From what I understand. Well, it's pretty interesting how this works. It's just a constant spring tension on this thing, basically. And here's like a spring washer that looks like it expands like this, and it gets held in place by this little dowel and then this dowel on this gear. And so essentially this is just going to fit back in here, and then somehow, under some miracle of God, I'm going to have to rotate this back into position to re-enter that service bolt. So the way the FSM says you should do it is basically just put like a bolt here and just kind of pry this thing around, right? So it'd probably be more similar to this. And then that is just going to rotate this outer gear, which will allow you to put that service bolt in, which is why you're supposed to use a vise. Though let me see if we do that next, or do we put this snap ring on first? So basically we reassemble everything the way it once was, right there. We put our snap ring back on. Oh Lord. Let's put this around first. And then get her close. All right. I don't think that went up and over though. One sec. They're not the greatest snap ring pliers ever. Okay, that should be enough to get us in here at least. But once the snap ring is past a certain point like it is, I think we can just give it a little tap to seat it. There we go. I think we're good there. Yeah, we're reinstalled. All right, so now we need service bolt A and service bolt B. So this is the bolt I'm gonna put in here, but before I do that, I need another bolt that's gonna go right here that will essentially allow me to lever, against it. These aren't threaded or anything. That one isn't. I'm just gonna look for, I think these are valve cover bolts. I don't have a ton of valve cover bolts. I bought brand new ones. So essentially what we need to do is somehow hold that, which is why you should use a vise if you have one. How many times am I gonna say vise? Put a vise counter up here. Editor, put a vise counter. How many times I say the word vise? It's got to be like 20 by now. If anyone that manufactures vices is watching this and would like to send me a vise, that would be cool. Okay, so it's not under a ton of tension, so it's not impossible. So what we're going to do is I'm going to lay this down like that. So, can I do this without lifting the camshafts up? All right, guys, I am going to have to move you, so you may not be able to watch this, but essentially, I think you guys understand what I'm doing. You guys are pretty smart. Basically, I am just levering this bolt, which is not the strongest bolt, but it's okay because it's not getting used again. And we're just gonna move this sub gear over until these two holes line up, hopefully, in a perfect world. And then we're gonna send this bolt back through, just like the good Lord intended. Look at that. And there we are. Our service bolts all the way through. So we did manage to get this back together. Really wasn't that bad. I thought it was going to be under a lot more tension than it actually was. So now that service bolt is ready. This sub gear is brand new. And now we can get this exhaust camshaft back in the head. All right, now we got our sub gear on. So we've got our journals all lubed up with Lucas Oil assembly lube. I actually went through a good bit of the stuff. I was being pretty liberal with it. I'm gonna lube up my exhaust camshaft off camera, and then I'm just gonna place it in. And we're gonna follow a very similar process to the intake camshaft. Actually, I lied. Step one, we're gonna rotate this intake camshaft until the two dot marks are facing the center of the head. Come on. So you want to face the two dot marks on the inside, which pretty much already there. So they got to be up at a 35-degree angle, apparently. And I ain't no mathematician, but this is pretty close to 35. And we're going to gently place our exhaust camshaft in here, just like so. And let me double check. I believe it's going to go like this. Yeah, so that's going to go at a 45 or a 35 angle as well, roughly. Methinks that looks about right. Let me just double check the FSM. Okay, so actually what we're going to do is we're going to rotate this intake camshaft and try to get these 2 dot marks to align, which they do. Pretty cool. Yeah, dude, I love Toyotas, man. Just their timing is just so easy comparative to like other brands. I am a pretty big fan, if you ask me. Anyway, so now we gotta get number 4 and number 6 bearing caps in their proper location. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. Let me get some assembly lube on these and on everything else. Why not? We're already here. Just do it. I know I use this stuff a lot, but it's good. It's good for it. It's like vegetables for camshafts, right? So number 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right here, and 6 right here. Looks about right. Just got to take our time, guys. It's just a lengthy process in general. Same thing we did with the intake side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So number 4 and number 6. So I'm just going to get this to the point where it's starting to feel a little resistance. Pretty much right there. And then we'll go to this side. So it looks like number 6 is probably a little bit higher. So why don't we start with number 6. Just doing half turns. So this is actually compressing the valve spring on the cylinder. And now let's get number 4 roughly to the same level as number 6. So far, so good. Nothing crazy happening. Okay, so sweaty part's over. Our 2 dot marks are still lined up with each other, so that's good news. So now we can put on the rest of these cam caps, I believe. Let me just make sure. Okay, so same steps as last time. 2, number 3, number 4. Sorry, 5. We already did 4, and number 7. Boom. All right, guys, same story as last time. Just gonna carefully, uniformly tighten these, which basically means just gonna run them all down.
A few moments later.
All right, we're gonna do number 1. Before we do number 1, I'm just gonna make sure all of these are hand tight. All right, now we can torque them all down to 12 as well. But before we do, let me show you guys what I mean by the 2 dot marks. So essentially, here's our 2 dot marks. So remember last time when we took it apart, it was a 1 dot mark. Now it's 2 that need to be placed together. And essentially, you just set this exhaust cam gear in here and rotate this until those 2 dot marks line up together. And you know, skip teeth if you need to. And that's pretty much it for timing. We're gonna get the timing chain on right now, but I gotta do a battery change. All right, folks, you guessed it. We're gonna be torquing this to 12 foot-pounds. I'm gonna start with the 2nd and then the 5th, I believe. 3rd and 5th? I think it was 2nd. Or 4th and 6th, whichever ones we started with. I don't think it really matters, to be honest. 12. All right, that's it for torquing. So now we got to rotate. So we already know our crankshaft is in top dead center. So now what we have to do is we have to rotate the camshaft until the single dot marks on this opposite side line up. So let me see if I can get you guys in here for that. Well, I think you guys can see the 2 dot marks. I think. Hope. And so basically I'm gonna rotate this. I'm gonna rotate it to the right. It doesn't really matter if I'm honest, because our timing chain isn't connected yet, but we're gonna rotate these. Actually, I'm gonna rotate it to this way since it's a little bit easier for me to show you guys. So you can see, not yet, it's not on screen yet. Okay, you can see the blue mark at the top right of your screen. And we're gonna fish that up with the other blue mark that is now at the very top of your screen. We're gonna make sure those things mesh together in perfect harmony if my wrench would fit on this thing. Okay, there we go. I'm actually using the camera to make sure that we are good. Just a little bit more. There we go. All right, so you can see our single dot marks are now lined up, which means we're at top dead center there. And I don't know if you can see, but our double dot marks are lined up with the head right here on this side, and the same on that side right there. So we're perfectly lined up with the top of this head. So now what we need to do is we need to come over here towards the front. Didn't mean to blind y'all. And we essentially need to take this cam gear and slide this guy on. And what that's going to do, that's going to align this dowel pin with this top slot right here. So I can already tell the dowel pin went in. And there we are. Pretty much flush. We can remove this now, which I should have done previously. No big deal. Thanks, Toyota, for just being so darn easy to work on. And just take it right back off. Make sure that doesn't get lost in my engine somewhere. But essentially, it slides right on. We're top dead center at the crank. Both of our single dot marks are lined up in here. Our dowel pin lines up just fine, and our double dot marks are aligned with the sides of the head. So we are timed right now. Actually, I need to take off this this bolt. I forgot to take off the service bolt, so we're gonna rotate back. Not a big deal. Let's take this back off real quick. Comes off pretty easy. Goes on and off pretty easy. Let me just rotate this to the top again. I think it's like exactly at the bottom right now. Yeah, of course it is. Why would it be at the top, guys? So we're just gonna rotate this so I can access it, essentially. And that's probably good enough. Get in there with a wrench and we will drive her on out. I was supposed to do this before I set the timing. FYI. Do this first. Might have to rotate this a little bit more. Thanks for non-interference engines, am I right, guys? Is this non-interference? I don't know if this is non-interference or not, actually. I read that it was, but you know, everything you read on the internet's true, right? Okay, now that the service bolt's out, we're gonna rotate her back into position. Same as we did first time. There we go. Now we can slip our timing chain back on here. Timing pulley. Okay, now we are good to put this little distributor gear in, which I need to find. So let me go do that and then I'll walk you through that. All right, ladies and gents, I've got our little distributor gear. Cleaned it up a little bit, still kind of gross. This dowel pin is going to go on this little indent right here. So this just needs to go in like so. Boom. Here's our bolt. I'm going to tighten this down, and then we're going to have to torque that here in a second. I don't know what size that is. That's probably like 17, maybe? Nah, 15, probably. I don't know. Let's see. Let's find out. I think 17. I think I was right. Oh, 19? Probably 19. All right, 19 mil bolt. I'm gonna drive this home by hand. And then I think we set the tensioner after this. Yeah, after this. So this gets tightened to 54 foot-pounds. And essentially all we're gonna do, we gotta hold the camshaft back there. And so back here at the usual spot. And then this guy is gonna get torqued to 54 foot-pounds. Boom. All right, ladies and gents, I need to find my tensioner gasket. I already have my tensioner, and then we can put that together. So let me go find that. We got our timing chain gasket, or sorry, timing chain tensioner gasket and our new tensioner. So when we install this gasket, the weird shaped part on that end is gonna go towards the front of the engine. According to the FSM, it does matter. And just make sure this guy's springy, good to go. And we're just going to insert this. I think it goes the other way though. Sure does. Insert this into here. Press it down with your finger. And then secure the bolts. And I believe these get torqued down to 12 foot-pounds. I will verify right now. 15 foot-pounds, 12. Sweet, torque this down. 15, 15. So now, timing is pretty much set. We gotta do one more thing. And we have to rotate this engine to make sure that our timing marks line back up again. Seems our timing chain tensioner is working, it's tight. So let's rotate this 360 degrees, which will put us halfway out. But I'll set you guys up so you can kind of watch our cam marks line up again, maybe, if y'all can see. I'm hoping the camera picks this up. I think it will. Okay, so I'm gonna rotate this twice, the crank, which will rotate the camshaft once. And we should be good to go on timing. If I don't move the entire engine, that is. So you can hear compression, so that's good. So this should be, yep, it's 180 out. Going to line up our top dead center mark at 0 again, down here on the crank pulley. All right, it's pretty much right at 0. And it looks like our single dot marks are lined up, as you guys can see right now. So let me just go over it with y'all. So I rotated it. I rotated the crank twice, which rotates the camshafts once. So you saw our single dot mark. So we've got the double dot right there lined up with and flush with the head, and we've got the same over on this side right here, it's lined up with the head, and then of course we are lined up at exactly 0 on our crank pulley. So that means our timing is done, which means I am done for today. So I wanted to put the valve cover on and all the valve cover gaskets and seal all that stuff, but I forgot to clean it. So I need to clean the valve cover, which I'm not gonna bother showing you guys. I'm just gonna clean it, and then we'll be back putting this valve cover together and ideally putting a lot of the accessories back on, the oil cooler together and stuff like that. So this is gonna be like part 1. We might have to split this at some point, but this might be a 2-parter just for this segment alone, but the event it is, let me do an outro now. So that's going to do it for us today, guys. Make sure you like this video if you found it helpful. Leave me some comments. I always read your comments. I always try to reply to your comments. Check out the links in my description for any AMSOIL products or the FSM link if you're looking for it. And with that being said, peace out, guys. See you at part 2. Boom.